is my distinct honor to call to order Texas Appellate Hall of Fame induction ceremony for 2021. This is a particularly special induction ceremony as we are welcoming our 10th and 11th classes, both the 2020 and 2021 classes of honorees. Here to MC the presentation is the co-chair of the Texas Bar Appellate Section's Hall of Fame Committee, Ms. Elizabeth Lee Thompson, who's a partner at Thompson Co. She's board certified by Texas Board of Legal Specialization and was for 6 years a staff attorney in the chambers of Dallas Court of Appeals Justice Elizabeth Lang Myers. Please join me in welcoming Lee Thompson.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Welcome everyone to the induction ceremony for the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame, recognizing our inductees for the 2020 and 2021 years. My name's Lee Thompson, as Dylan has already said, and I have the honor of co-chairing the Texas Hall of Fame Committee with Jackie Stroh. I'd like to extend my thanks to Jackie, whose tireless efforts made this ceremony possible today. The Texas Appellate Hall of Fame was created in 2011 by the Appellate Section of the State Bar of Texas and the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society. It recognizes jurists and practitioners who have made unique contributions to appellate practice in the state of Texas. This year's inductees were selected by a board of trustees composed of the president of the Historical Society, the chairman of the appellate section, and various practitioners from throughout the state of Texas. The trustees voted on a slate of nominees and selected 3 inductees for 2020 and 4 for 2021. The group includes judges and practitioners who have made unique contributions to the practice of appellate law in Texas. The group includes judges from all 3 levels of our state judiciary, as well as judges from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. It also includes practitioners who have practiced law for over 7 decades and have served as counsel in hundreds of appellate matters across the state. These inductees are exceptional exemplars of the positive and lasting mark that an attorney can make when practicing in the legal profession. Now, before we invite our first speaker to the stage, I would like to express my gratitude to the family members we have in the attendance today representing the inductees. Would you all please stand and be recognized as a group? First, to speak on behalf of 2020 inductee, Justice Jack Hightower, is Kent Hance, who was a longtime friend of and served in Congress with Justice Hightower. Please welcome Kent Hance.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate being here. Jack Hightower was indeed my friend and a mentor and a law partner. And he's a guy that served as county attorney, district attorney, state representative, state senator, and U.S. congressman and Texas Supreme Court. A most honorable man I've ever known, and was a dear friend. In Congress one time, I had the chairman of Ways and Means get mad at me and do some things he shouldn't have done, and Jack was trying to console me, and he said, you need to pray for your enemies. He was an honorable man. And I saw him a few days later, and he said, "Are you praying for your enemies?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." But he knew me well, and he said, "What are you praying?" I said, "I'm praying to get hit by a truck." And he worked on me and finally got me through that. And he was the kind of guy that, had he played poker, which he didn't, you could have played with him over the telephone. And if he got a 2 of clubs, he'd tell you, "I got a 2 of clubs." And he was just that kind of person. But he was a great lawyer, and I accuse him on times of reading cases on the weekend, you know, as a hobby. But I'm honored to be here and speak on his behalf. And also, Judge Sam Johnson was a dear friend of mine, and we was appointed to the Fifth Circuit. I went over and testified in front of the U.S. Senate on his behalf. And what honorable people that you've appointed, and I say congratulations to the committee. You did an outstanding job, and I'm just honored to be here. Jack Hightower was the best. I couldn't ask for a better friend or a better man. He's got two of his daughters here, and they can attest to that as well. God bless you.
Here to speak on behalf of 2020 inductee Phil Durst is Randy Roach. Randy was a law school classmate, teaching colleague, and frequent co-counsel with Phil Durst. Please welcome Randy Roach.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, trustees, to the Hall of Fame for Texas Appellate Lawyers. For many people, Phil Durst was a first-call appellate lawyer. He was for me, he was for a number of us, especially when it comes to civil rights or employment cases or lost causes. Phil was the champion of lost causes. Nobody did more pro bono work, nobody did more civil rights work, no one did more employment work for free than my dear friend Phil Durst, because he believed. He believed in the courts, he believed in judges, he believed in the rule of law, even when the things didn't look so good for his side. Phil Durst was known by this group as a multiple Cassidy Award winner, given to the person voted by attendees at this seminar, State Bar Appellate, as the top presenter for that year, more than once. Phil succeeded Fifth Circuit Judge Jerry Jett Williams as the University of Texas employment law professor after many, many years. Phil succeeded him for another set of many, many years. And when a friend of his in need said, Bill Powers at UT has just asked that we set up an appellate program at UT, like the one that my friend Kevin DuBose set up at the University of Houston in 1990, Doug Alexander, Dana Cobb, and Phil Durst came to the rescue. And for many years, Phil taught the appellate class. There are so many people who are indebted to Phil's wisdom, his mentorship as students, that I can't count. In any Hall of Fame induction ceremony that I've ever seen, the good ones are all about the thank yous by the inductees. Sadly, Phil succumbed to metastatic cancer and a terribly weakened body in 2019, but only after he had been given a 4 to 6 month diagnosis, and then Texas Oncology and Professor Jeff Urey, Dr. Jeff Urey, tried something totally experimental, not approved by the FDA. It gave Phil another 5 years of life. It gave him the opportunity to meet his granddaughter, which was the single most important thing in his life at that time. He was always, when he gave his introductions at CLEs, would credit his wife, Sarah, an outstanding lawyer, again, from the AG's office who went into immigration practice. He called her his long-suffering wife. And his two outstanding kids, Emma and Eli, who were incredibly accomplished because of the love that Phil gave and Sarah gave to those kids. Phil himself was the product of a brilliant artist, mother, who died very young, and an unbelievably accomplished real estate developer whose primary concern in life was not business, but was Phil, their only son. Phil would say, I don't care about any of this. It's my family, it's my kids, it's my grandchildren that I care about. So it's for me to say he would truly, truly have appreciated this. He meant so much to so many of us, and I thank the trustees for this great election. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, to speak on behalf of 2020 inductee Carlos Villarreal is Augie Rivera, who was a close friend and law partner of Carlos Villarreal. Please welcome Augie Rivera.
Thank you, Lee. On behalf of my dear friend, Carlos Alberto Villarreal, his wife of almost 25 years, Amy Heron Villarreal, and their two children, Franklin and Allie, I want to thank the Civil Appellate Section Hall of Fame Committee and the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society for selecting Carlos for this immeasurable honor and inducting him into the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame. As his friend for almost 25 years and his law partner for a few of those, I can tell you that Carlos would have been deeply honored to have his name and professional career and accomplishments placed in the same company as the other extraordinary Texas jurists and attorneys who are being inducted today and who are already in this august and exclusive group. I also think he would have been a little bit surprised and humbled that anyone actually noticed him and the great work he was doing down in Corpus Christi for over 30 years. But he would have been most grateful that this honor is being bestowed by you, his peers and colleagues whom he immensely respected. Carlos was also a huge Houston Astros fan, so making it to the Hall of Fame would have been especially fun for him. He was born and raised in Corpus Christi, but spent much of his childhood with his extended family in Monterrey, Mexico. His mother impressed upon him and his siblings the value of education, and he graduated from UTEP, University of Texas at El Paso, with a degree in metallurgical engineering. It was during his engineering studies that he learned all about failure analysis. And even though he worked as an engineer for a few years, it was this interest that ultimately led him to the University of Texas Law School. He was moved particularly by the examples of many companies that, for the sake of saving costs, would avoid simple design fixes that ended in catastrophic results. Recruited by Jim McKibben to come back to Corpus Christi, he joined the law firm of Hunt, Hermanson, McKibben, and Barger upon graduation in 1986, and he began his legal career with the only firm that he would ever work for. In South Texas, in the late 80s, some of you know this, the high volume of litigation activity and very active trial dockets of his law partners in the firm provided Carlos with a trial-by-fire introduction to the practice of law, and he embraced the challenge. Drawn to the analytical and research aspects of appellate law, Carlos soon found himself handling all of the firm's appellate work, which provided him with the opportunity to work on some fairly significant cases out of the late 80s. Always an inquisitive mind, in 1989, Carlos followed his intellectual curiosity to Harvard Law School, where he earned an LLM. Like at UT, Carlos dove into the work and flourished in the law school environment, where, tempered at that point by some real-world experience, he was able to explore the law and how it interacts with culture and race with a more critical lens. After graduating from Harvard in 1990, Carlos returned to Hunt Hermanson and returned in earnest to his work as an appellate lawyer. He became board certified in appellate law in 1992. He developed a very busy appellate docket and appeared before appeals courts throughout Texas and the Supreme Court many times. He has over 100 Texas appellate opinions that bear his name as counsel. He also earned distinction in his career as one of University of Texas School of Law's Distinguished Minority Alumni Portrait Collection, and there's an endowed scholarship at the law school that bears his name. The scholarship provides full tuition to a first-year student of high merit who is interested in the law and its role in promoting pluralism in our society and on the limits of judicial lawmaking. One final note about my dear friend Carlos. As the son of immigrants from Mexico and growing up on both sides of the border, Carlos was always cognizant of the reality of race and culture in our society and in the law, and in the cases in which he worked. While at Harvard, he actually focused on the intersectionality between law and race, and he authored 2 law review articles in 1991, Culture and Lawmaking, a Chicano Perspective, and Limits on Lawmaking, a Chicano Perspective. Both articles remain as important works in what was then the newly developing discipline of legal analysis, known as critical legal studies, and now its progeny, critical race theory. Carlos was always very proud to have been one of the early contributors to this important scholarship and his own personal effort to examine the role of race and culture in the law. I have to say he'd be bemused by the controversy over CRT today. And if he were here, I know he would tell you there's nothing sinister about CRT. Don't believe the hype, and let's sit down and talk about it over a beer. Carlos would want me to thank his partners, his lifelong partners at Hunt, Hermanson, McKibben, and Barger, Brian Miller, his protege, who was also one of his partners at the firm and his nominee for this award, and Daria Hughes, his longtime trusted assistant. Carlos was deeply passionate about all things meaningful in life to him, his family, his friends, and the law. But his grand obra, his big work, his great work, was his 25-year marriage to Amy and the two purest joys of his life, his children, Franklin, Raul, and Alejandra. Amy, Franklin, and Ali, this is for you. Thank you all.
Now to begin our 2021 inductees. Here to speak on behalf of Chief Justice Frank Evans is Lynn Liberato. Lynn practiced with Chief Justice Evans at Haynes and Boone in Houston. Please welcome Lynn Liberato.
Thank you, Lee. What a treat this is, to listen to these wonderful people who are getting these awards in these difficult times. It's really uplifting. So I'm happy to be here for that reason and to look out and see so many friends. I do have one addition, though. Judge Evans did join us at Haynes and Boone for a while, but I was his chief staff attorney for 9 years and saw him 5 days a week for 9 years. And that's really from where this comes from, and for other things too. For a generation of lawyers and judges, Chief Justice Evans was simply one of the best legal minds and greatest leaders in Texas. From his appointment to the Houston First in 1973 to his retirement as chief in 1991, judges, court attorneys, and staff treasured him as our chief. So we, the members of the First Court family, were blessed to work for a giant like Frank Evans. Now, for many, and some have even said this as recently as like 10 minutes ago to me, wasn't he the ADR guy? Well, yes, he was the ADR guy. And many people, probably most, know him as the father of alternative dispute resolution. But this reference to him and this honor to him has been a little bit of a frustration to those of us who worked at the Court of Appeals and the lawyers who practiced in front of him, because his position as evangelizer in chief of ADR certainly is a great one, but is eclipsed and maybe sometimes overshadowed what a great justice he was. He probably would have been the most proud of his ADR success, but he would also be very proud of this because his induction into the Appellate Hall of Fame is a tribute to the depth of the wisdom, the leadership, and the judgment that he brought in deciding cases and leading the appellate courts through complex times. Judge Evans authored 1,680 opinions. During most of his tenure, he was the most productive judge, not just at the Court of Appeals, but of any Texas appellate court. At the same time, he was nurturing ADR, he was supervising the building of new court facilities, and he was adapting the court to criminal jurisdiction. Some of y'all remember when that happened. I'd also like to mention, because this is probably not well known, he was a Marine who fought in Korea, and he didn't have an undergraduate law degree. An undergraduate degree. I think he went to UT for, I know he did, he went to UT for a couple of years, went and fought in Korea, and came back and went directly into law school. But I think that Marine mentality, that Marine drive, that Marine discipline is what he brought to all aspects of the things that he did as law, and probably it helped me a lot that I was a military brat, and so I understood that type of leadership and flourished in it and admired him particularly for that. Judge Evans was a public servant, he was a visionary, he was a force for change, and he was a great appellate judge. Through his example, he taught us to reach beyond the practice of law to make the world a better place. I'm joined here today by his dear friend who's really more of a son, Al Amato. Thank you, Al, for being here. And as I look out, by judges and lawyers who either are at the First Court or have been and know from what I speak. So let me conclude by saying that we, the Grain members of his First Court family, will always cherish our Chief Justice. And as such, we are grateful to be able to honor his memory today as he is inducted into the Appellate Hall of Fame. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lee. Oh, shoot. Can't get by without a clap.
Next to speak on behalf of 2021 inductee, Judge Sam Johnson, are his son and attorney, Sam Johnson Jr., and daughter, Paige Johnson Harris. Please welcome both Sam and Paige.
Well, hello. It's a real honor to get up and talk about my dad. Everybody likes their dad, or at least most people do, and I had a great one. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person, a wonderful judge, but a great dad to me and to the family first. But I'm going to give you a quick primer on my father. He was born in 1920 in Hubbard, Texas, which is in Hill County, which the center of Hill County is Hillsborough. There's only had 1,500 people. His father died when he was 8. He went off to Baylor in 1938 and he started, and he was a horrible student. He dropped out of Baylor. He got in trouble. He joined the Merchant Marine. He sailed around South America, but he had one thing that was coming at him, and that was Adolf Hitler. World War II started. He was drafted. He went out. He joined the Army. He had a great career in the Army. He went in as a private, and he left the Army as a private. But he did fight in a battle called Metz. It was a really tough issue. Basically, 10% of the division was killed. The other 50% was wounded. And he got out of the Army, and he decided he didn't want to ever be a private ever again. And so he went back to Baylor. He got out of Baylor, made straight A's, then went to the University of Texas Law School. And in June 1, 1946, about 18 months after he was wounded, he made the best decision of his life because he married my mom, June Johnson. And she was great. And together they were great. They had a real partnership, and they were a formidable political team. If my mama was here, she would be trying to talk to every single one of you, and she'd be the last one to leave and turn out the lights because she liked visiting with people and she liked knowing what was going on. So Dad got out. He went back to Hillsborough, where he grew up. He was county attorney, district judge. Then he left being district judge to go down to Houston, and he helped set up the Houston Legal Foundation in Houston. Then in 1967, he was one of the first 3 judges on the 14th Court of Appeals. And then he ran for the Texas Supreme Court in 1972. He was unopposed, probably the last judge to run for the Texas Supreme Court unopposed. He went on the Texas Supreme Court in 72. He was on the Texas Supreme Court until 79 when he was appointed by Jimmy Carter to the Fifth Circuit, and he was on the Fifth Circuit until his death. He loved being a judge. He took it very seriously. He wanted everybody to get a fair shake. He was a big big time against the death penalty, but he was also, number one thing he felt was important was for a judge to get all of his opinions out on time. And when judges that he'd be working with who wouldn't get their opinions out on time, you could tell that he'd start talking around about things, and he'd get all kind of a little upset about things that were going on at the court. Dad was one of only 2 judges to be on the Texas Supreme, one of only 5 judges to be on the Texas Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit. One was Judge Reavley, and he was basically a judge or a prosecutor for 50 years, and he took public service very, very seriously. He was also a big jogger. He started jogging before it was cool. He loved to jog, and in fact, on his gravestone, we said that Dad loved family, friends, jogging, laughter, and justice. He was a really good guy, and he had a great sense of humor, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you guys about it. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Here to speak on behalf of 2021 inductee Judge Tom Reavley is Alex Albright, who served as one of Judge Reavley's law clerks on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Please welcome Alex Albright.
Thank you. Wow, looking out to see people, it's amazing. So thank you all for doing this. I first met Judge Reavley in the early 1960s when my dad was his law partner. But I got to know him years later when I became his law clerk. It was his second year on the Fifth Circuit, and I was his first female clerk ever. When he died a year ago yesterday, at age 99 and a half, he still maintained a full active docket. Judges who sat with him and lawyers who argued before him, even at the end, told me he was just amazing, and he was. His biggest fan is his wife, Judge Carolyn Deneen King. They married when he was 83, and he told me then that he just might live to be 100 because she took such good care of him. He took good care of her too, and they both thrived after getting married. And they were adorable together. Have you all ever heard anybody describe Judge King as adorable? She really is. Judge Reavley looked a little like LBJ and had the instincts of a politician learned from his years running for office. I remember hearing him talking to fellow judges on the phone. "My favorite judge," he would say as he answered the phone. Although he'd made it clear to us earlier that day that this judge was not his favorite, and this judge needed to learn to read the record. Reading the entire record was sacrosanct. We were not allowed to begin an opinion until we had read it all. Why was the record so important? Because it was integral to his code for appellate judging. Write short and clear opinions only on dispositive issues. Recognize that fact issues are not yours to decide. And apply the rule of law, not your personal preference for how the case should be decided. He was not only the dean, but the pope of the Fifth Circuit, known for his faith-based commitment to morality and civility. He loved the law and truly believed lawyers and judges were needed for society. He was kind and interested in everyone, calling their names and asking about their families. It was a joy to go to lunch with him at El Gallo or Arky's Grill or the Headliners and watch him in action. He would be delighted with this honor of being inducted to the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame. As Judge King told me, he had only a small tinge of the glory hound in him, and this would have been just right as far as he was concerned. So thank you, and as he would say, felicitations.
Lastly, to speak on behalf of 2021 inductee Royal Brin is Judith Blakeway, who is senior counsel at Clark Hill Strasburger, formerly Strasburger and Price, where Mr. Brin practiced law for over 70 years. Please welcome Judith Blakeway.
Royal Brin was an appellate lawyer before there was such a thing as appellate lawyers. He graduated from UT Law School in 1940 with the highest GPA in the law school's history, with a record that stood for decades. Royal joined the firm of Strasburger Price, Holland, Kelton, and Miller in 1946. And at that time, there was only one lawyer in Texas whose practice was focused exclusively on appellate work. That lawyer was Hobart Price, who was formally inducted into the Appellate Hall of Fame, and one of the namesakes of the firm of Strasburger and Price, which is now Clark Hill Strasburger. Royal started out as a trial lawyer, but he began helping Mr. Price with his appeals, and he eventually gravitated to appellate work. Royal never sought any kind of honors or accolades, but they seemed to find him anyway. He was the president of the Texas Association of Defense Counsel. He was chairman of the ABA Tort and Insurance Practice Section. He was a fellow of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers, and he was contacted by both Texaco and Pennzoil to represent them in the largest appellate case in Texas history involving $11 billion. Several years ago, a former Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court contacted one of my partners, Michael Young, and asked why Royal was not a member of the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame. He thought that was an outrage. Mike had to explain to him that membership in the Hall of Fame was limited to lawyers who were deceased. Mr. Brin was not eager to become a member. Sadly, Mr. Brin passed away just last year at the age of 101. He was never board certified as an appellate lawyer. He didn't need to be. He was part of the team that wrote the first ever board certification exam in appellate law, which was given in 1987. Mr. Brin was very quiet and unassuming, mild-mannered person, but when he got in a courtroom, he showed a different side to his personality. One of my partners said that he was like a desert flower. He sat quietly most of the time, but then he burst into bloom during a rainstorm. He did not pull back from the practice of law until he was about 75 years old. But he remained involved in the firm's appellate practice group. We had monthly meetings, and at those meetings, he would always amuse us by telling us what was new in the world of magic and perform magic tricks, because he was a well-respected and accomplished magician. And it wasn't just his clients who thought so. Or he would tell us about the latest John Grisham novel he was reading, but he would also take a great interest in our appeals, and he would offer very helpful suggestions about how to handle them. In 2016, he was interviewed for an article in the TADC newsletter, And he was asked if you could give 3 pieces of advice to a young lawyer, what would they be? Here was his answer. He said, first, be thoroughly prepared. Know the facts and know the law. Second, be cooperative with your opposition. Practicing law is hard enough without making it more difficult. And finally, adopt a practice of civility from the very beginning of your career. Royal lived by those principles, and more importantly, he taught us those principles. We at Clark Hill Strasburger are honored to continue to try to live up to Royal's legacy of excellence in the practice of appellate law, and we thank you for honoring him with this award.
Thank you for joining us today to honor these 7 deserving individuals. Let's please give a final round of applause for the 2020-2021 inductees to the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame.